Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. I'm David Waybright, here with Jeremy Salinas, today with a preview of Delve from Indie Boards and Cards.
That's right. This is a brand new one by Richard Lanius and Pete Sherry, who is, Richard Lanius, of course, is famous for Arkham Horror, and Pete is a marketing director at CMON.
Exactly.
He actually made a game called Shark Island, so this is a collaboration between the two of them, and it is a tile-laying dungeon crawler.
Yeah.
It harkens a little bit to Carcassonne in the same way that you're laying tiles and then putting your people on the map in those positions.
Right. I was talking to Travis Chance about this just the other day from Indie Boards and Cards, and we were talking about how it's kind of like mixes Carcassonne with that feeling of playing D&D when you were a kid, but not right. Like without all of the complex rules, it's just kind of like the fun part of like diving in a dungeon.
Yeah.
So it's like those two things combined, but I think it's a good description.
So each player is going to play, it's 2 to 4 players.
Yeah.
And it lasts about 45 minutes to an hour.
It's on the shorter side.
It's another one of those games that is controlled by the players at the time, because some of the tiles will have these sun icons on them, which will move the rounds further.
Right.
And there's going to be an X number of rounds depending upon how many players are in the game.
Yeah, so you can wrap it up or draw it out. I mean, you are drawing the tiles, so it depends on that, but you can find yourself with some sun tiles in your hand, and you can really move things along if you want.
So each player is going to start with a particular class, and we have the kobolds, the sellswords, the wraiths, and then the forest folk.
Yeah.
And these each of these classes basically do the same thing in the game, although they do have a unique ability when you use experience with them.
Yeah, they have a unique ability, and they have 5 characters each.
Yes.
And 4 of them are the same. Yep. Then each class has one unique character doubled.
Yes.
You know, so the forest folk, I think, have 2 leaders.
Yeah.
I think the sellswords have maybe 2 brutes, things like that.
Yeah, 2 thieves for the kobolds. And what those mean is that each of them are going to roll a different amount of dice.
Right.
So, for instance, the leader's going to roll different dice than the thieves. So there's some strategy in there on which guys you want to place into the dungeon when you're laying the tiles.
Yeah, and we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. I mean,
Sure.
we can talk about the game structure because it's all going to make a lot more sense then.
Yeah.
I mean, the game's pretty simple. It starts with this entrance tile, and everyone is going to have 3 tiles in their hand at the beginning of the game.
Right.
3 XP, which you can spend on a variety of things throughout the game, and of course all of your party.
Right.
So first player is going to lay down a tile, and this is where the Carcassonne comes in, obviously. You have to lay it down according to some rules. You're wanting to try to match up rooms.
Right.
Now, the cool thing here is you don't have to match up every single room here. There's these bluish rooms and these beigeish rooms, but the core component here are the hallways.
Yeah.
You have to lay these things so that the hallways match up. You can't have hallways dead-ending into a room.
Right.
You can lay a hallway so that it's kind of open up to nothing for its next tile.
Now, there is a rule, as you were previously mentioning about using experience. You can use an experience to illegally place a tile if you're stuck or if you want to close off a room that you typically wouldn't be able to close off.
Exactly. So each player in turn is going to follow this. You lay a tile, and whenever you lay a tile, you're going to take one of your characters and place it on the tile that you laid.
That's right.
Now, the interesting thing here is you could lay a tile that has a hallway, one of the blue rooms, one of the beige rooms. You can choose which room he goes in.
Yes.
So this is where some of the strategy comes into play, because you're trying to close up these rooms, and you can either try to build a big room full of tons of treasure and gold, or simply place a tile that's going to close off a simple little room and be in there all by yourself.
Right.
So the players are going to do this around the table. Whenever on anyone's turn a room closes, you resolve it.
Right.
And like I said, there's a couple different ways that they get resolved.
Yeah, now the interesting portion is that when you resolve a room, you either resolve the room against another player, if 2 players are in that room, or you resolve the room against an encounter deck here.
Right. If you're alone, you go up and against an encounter, which is where a lot of the flavor and fun comes in.
Yeah, exactly. Each of these encounter cards in the game give you some story text, right? Yeah. Some flavor, and then it gives you an option of A or B. Very much like a choose your own adventure.
Exactly.
And then it's that person's turn, or that person's choice on which of those 2 options they wish to play out.
Yeah, and you don't get a lot of information on those options. I mean, you can play it that way if you'd like, but the way they recommend is that you just get sort of the flavor of the options.
Right.
Some of those cards are going to have dice on them that represent the monster that you're facing. You're not supposed to know that. So another player will read this card to the player who's going right then.
Right.
So that's what happens when you're in a room alone. When you're in a room with other people, it can be one other player. It can be all 4 players, depending on how big the room has gotten and how everyone's laid their tiles. When that happens, everyone reveals their characters, and then everyone rolls their dice, and you're basically going to stack up combat points and spoils points.
Right.
So the combat points, whoever's in the lead with the combat points at the end after all your rolling, and the rolling's kind of interesting here. There's some opportunities
to re-roll dice.
To re-roll dice.
Kind of like explosions.
Yeah,
when you roll them, you get whatever it says on the dice, and then you re-roll the die to get, more combat or more spoils or whatnot.
Yeah, and like Jeremy said earlier, the characters come into play here too, because like the thief characters are going to use these purple die more often, which are more of the spoils dice, less of combat. The brutes are going to use the yellow, and then the white dice are pretty much more of a common dice.
Right.
So everyone rolls their dice. Whoever wins the combat wins the room, so they're going to get the largest portion of the gold. If there's multiple people in there, they get half of it.
Yeah.
And then each player after that,
gets half
I think
of
the
that,
second and third player gets half and half and half.
Right.
And then on the spoils, though, which is interesting, is you could go in there with your thief and be up against a whole bunch of people. You know you're going to lose the combat.
Right.
But you might end up actually winning the spoils, because whoever's furthest on the spoils, they get the spoils.
That's right.
And depending on how far you've reached up the spoils track here, your spoils are going to be different. It's either going to be gold, 1 gold, or a treasure card, which is significant.
Now, it's interesting because each of the tiles also has different things on them. So you have tiles with the gold, and that, as you said, that's going to be split up between players. When you draw gold, you draw gold cards. And on those gold cards, there's gold equal from 1, 2, or 3.
Right.
And those are placed face down, so no one knows how much gold you have at the end of the game. The game is all about getting the gold that you see here. But there's also rooms with treasure. And each of these treasure cards allow you to, some of them have gold on them, but some of them also have special abilities that you can use, or multipliers at the end of the game for particular things that you have.
And they too also have victory points basically for the end of the game.
Right.
But the treasures give you a little bit more flexibility, because some of the things you're able to maybe re-roll a die or do different things on your turn.
There's also interesting rooms in there that have like totems that wizards do better in those rooms. They add 3 combat going into the fight. So placing your mages in those areas is good. And there's also places with torches. Yeah,
the torches are really cool.
So when you place into a torch room, you have to place your guys face up so people know what you have going into that room already.
Exactly.
Very, very, very interesting game. It's going to take, typically a game lasts in about 45 minutes, as we said.
Yeah, and the board is what's interesting too. You might need some table space here, and you might not, because it is also up to the players. This board can grow. The only rule is it can't grow behind this board or up around the sides of it, but it can go any other direction out away from here.
Yeah.
So you could take it out sideways, you could take it all over the place. Our boards, when we've played, have gotten probably maybe double the size of this, twice this size. And that was with, I think, 3 players when we played. Yeah. But again, it's largely up to the players.
That's right.
The game is just a lot of fun. I mean, I think that's a great describer of this game. A lot of fun. It's not the deepest game in the world. You're rolling dice. There's a lot of luck involved, obviously, but it is a fun dungeon diving experience.
But it's not meant to be, and there are ways to mitigate some of the dice. Now, we mentioned experience at the very beginning. There's 5 things you can do with experience. One of them is to roll extra white dice.
Yeah.
So you can kind of hoard experience. Experience is hard to get, and you typically only get experiences from specific encounters for winning them, and some of the treasures also give you experience. So you have to use them wisely when you use them.
And then there's chances to give up experience in some of the encounters too.
Yeah.
Like you can succeed just by giving up one of your experience, or are you going to roll the dice against the troll or anything like that. Yeah, the card variety is really interesting. They put a lot of effort into the humor in the writing of the cards too. It's a very fun game to play in that respect.
Yeah.
And it's got, like you said, enough depth, I think, to make it an intriguing experience as well.
That's right. So, guys, that is from Indie Boards and Cards. It is on Kickstarter.
Now.
Should be right now, yeah. Go check it out. Make sure you guys make comments below in our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to us. Follow us on Twitter. Like us on Facebook and everything else that we do here at Man vs. Meeple. And we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.